Hi, kids and non-kids. This is Politics for People Who Hate Politics. I'm Lucy Steigerwald. I have a very nice panel today, and every day, but especially today, because today is today. We have Chris Morgan, who needs more confidence when he says that he's a writer. We have Robby. Damn it, I forgot how to pronounce your name again because I kept thinking about it. So, is it Soave? Is it what the hell is it again, Robby? Tell
Doesn't
us.
matter.
It does matter, Robby. It does. Who's in?
Suave.
Suave.
But I don't
Okay.
care. I'm not picky.
Who is the editor for Reason, whatever that is. We have my friend Bob. We have an anarchist who can't be on time, figures. And we have Jeff Tucker, who is the big man in charge at Liberty.me and is also with Phoebe, which those rhyme, and they're both good organizations. So thanks for joining me, kids. And we have William Gillis, the anarchist, who's sitting in the dark.
Hi.
What?
Sorry.
I'm losing confidence in you already, buddy, with your audio quality. All right, so we're here to talk first and foremost about college kids and what they're up to lately in free speech and all the big news in, Yale and also the University of Missouri. And I would love if Robby would start off because he writes about this a lot at Reason. Robby, can you sum up what's happening at the college campuses at all?
Yeah, everybody's going pretty nuts. There's a lot of protests happening everywhere actually today, but kind of I guess the recent wave of things started at Yale and Missouri over the last week. At Missouri, there's kind of been racial tensions, I suppose you would say, building for a couple of weeks. The black student uh, head of the student government, the student body president, a black student complained that someone yelled a slur at him who was driving by him, like in early September. There were a couple more things like that. There was allegedly a swastika smeared on a door in a bathroom, so the students kind of the black student activists on campus kind of organized themselves, and they wanted the president of the university, Tim Wolf, to address their concerns. It's not really clear what he could have done to kind of prevent random people yelling insensitive things, but he was perceived as not understanding and sympathetic enough, although he did eventually meet with them. And then another student began a hunger strike in protest of the president to get him to apologize and actually resign. And then when the football team endorsed that action a few days ago, they said they would not play any more games until he left. That took care of it. So he stepped down. And then it kind of you saw there the active students on campus, they were celebrating, and they had this kind of enclave, and then journalists tried to talk to them, and other students formed a human shield to prevent reporters from interacting and interviewing the protesters. And that's when you started seeing a lot of the free speech concerns kind of coming up with this case. I'll just add briefly, so the Yale situation has been more outrage over offensive Halloween costumes. Actually, outrage over the idea that you should be allowed to wear an offensive Halloween costume, that administrators shouldn't paternalistically prevent you from doing that. And there's been calls for administrators to resign for having failed to construct a safe space for these students. So these things have kind of been tied together and have resulted in a lot of protests happening at other campuses, some resignations of administrators. I think they raise a lot of free speech concerns, even though I don't want to be condemning of student activism, and
Right.
there's a lot for you to be upset about a student tuition spiraling out of control, a lot of other issues. But to the extent that they concentrate their kind of issues on preventing hate speech and intolerant speech is where it starts to bump up against things that make me uncomfortable that they would advocate for those things. So I guess I'll leave it at that to kind of start the discussion.
That's a good start, and there's a couple of avenues to pursue, including what's sort of relevant to libertarianism, and we can open this up. Y'all don't need to be polite or anything, but maybe a little bit polite. But initially, it seemed like the Missouri thing was more vague and more potentially had some merit, and the Yale thing, to me, seemed a lot more embarrassing, particularly because these people go to Yale and they seem very delicate and very just they go to Yale, it just seems a bit more closer to sort of the parody that our friend Sonny Bunch at the Washington Free Beacon might put on his fake social justice Tumblr, things like that. Missouri, I don't know. It seems like there could be something there or not, but then you did have that footage of people yelling at journalists.
It was, Tim Tye was the guy's name, right? He was like ESPN contracted him to take pictures for them of the events, and he was a photojournalism student at Missouri.
Which makes the fact that the professor yelled at him even more kind of ridiculous, because he was actually a student there as well, so he had sort of extra legitimacy being present.
I just got back from a campus lecture at Hampton-Sydney in Virginia, which is a wonderful university, all male, 1,000 students, 40% economics majors, probably 20% chemistry, 20% math, something like that, and I don't know what the rest. But some of the best kids I'd ever met in my life, great faculty, no conflicts, everybody's enjoying studying. They're studying hard. Their classes are hard. They're hard at work. They got things to do. They got big lives ahead of them. They're all thinking about their careers. They all take internships with businesses. The university encourages them to do that. They're all most of the kids there have, because I just did informal surveys, have variously worked in the commercial sector at one point or another in their lives, because their parents have sort of encouraged that. And a very normal, beautiful, happy environment. It's like what I like to think a university should be. And so I look at these situations at Yale and University of Missouri and everything, and what I see is something completely different. I see students who have no connection to the real world at all. Increasingly, these universities are like four-year holding tanks for infantilized, coddled children, who have nothing better to do than just attend 10 lectures every day, find good parties, and then find first world problems to complain about.
Dang.
I don't think it has anything to do with free speech, political correctness. I think, nor do I think it has any larger cultural implications. I think these are just weird artificial environments where a lot of students with no life experience, nothing commercially to do, no value to find in anybody or add to anybody else's lives, living off other people's money, just making trouble because they're bored out of their minds. That's what I think.
Woo! Wow.
I actually agree with that.
Okay.
Because when I was thinking especially of the Yale situation, which is the more cartoonish kind of the situations, it made me think of, it kind of goes back to what exactly is college for? Because there are a lot of conflicting views. Like, the parents want the diploma. They're paying for the diploma. And the professors want tenure and their soapbox. And students, broadly speaking, want to, form their own identities independent of wherever they grew up. And the administration wants to provide as much of that as possible to make it work and, acquire tuition and all that. And so there's a lot of, crossbreeding there. And some of it works more than others. And I saw a lot of that sort of crashing at Yale. These students want, whatever safety or comfort they want, which some have written that Yale kind of promises in their promotional items, and which they take at face value. So that's just more of what I saw as opposed to, free speech conflicts.
Yeah. I mean, this woman was screaming at this dorm room monitor guy or whatever, the head of the house.
Is the master.
Yeah, which I'm surprised they've allowed that terminology.
Yeah. Well, but she was screaming at him and saying this is not about creating an intellectual space. This is about this is our home. Well, and in a way she's right. I mean, they've just gone from home to home to home, and never experienced anything like a commercial environment. I mean, if this girl who's screaming that had ever worked at Starbucks and had to serve a cup of coffee to a complaining customer, she might know something about tolerance and about the way the world works.
It's about right.
But none of them have ever had any experience in this. I mean, they've learned is about the history of oppression, and the way to respond to it is through protest. They're trying to put that into action, in a way that she was made to feel uncomfortable. It's like, this is my home, so she's made to feel uncomfortable. So she responds the only kind of method that she's ever known. I mean, you just have to remember just the level of coddling here is outrageous.
I mean, that student. I mean, she was pretty ridiculous in that situation. Like I just listened to like a clip of her yelling at the master. It was Christakis was his name, but and part of the response was to a letter his wife wrote, which was incredibly incredibly moderate, and basically saying that, saying, hey, I think you're adults and you can act like adults and figure these things out for yourselves.
Yeah, I know. I read the letter.
And then they were like, nope, we can't do that.
Yeah,
which it was ridiculous, but at the same time, like that's something I think that kind of that needs to be pushed back against. Just sort of the whole point, like, of us talking about this, is that you need to push back against that idea that a home is not an intellectual space.
Thank you, Robert. I was gonna actually jump on that. I mean, you don't want it, full tilt debate 24/7 in your actual home, even my home. but like the idea that they're completely at odds is very strange to me.
Well, that's true. But I guess my main point is that they've never experienced anything other than home and classroom. And in a corporate environment, or a real business kind of commercial sector sort of arrangement, one thing is you have to have tolerance. I mean, you have to get along with people who are different from you. You have to be able to roll with the punches. I mean, that's just part of the real world. And I also think that this free speech stuff it's not entirely invalid, but I do think it's a bit of a distraction. I mean, there's no corporate office in this country anywhere that has so-called free speech where you can say whatever the hell you want, anytime you want. I know that academia is a kind of a special place, but I'm not sure that that's really the subject, and nor do I think it's political correctness is the problem. I think it's just rampant immaturity, coddling, and an asylum-like atmosphere.
Well, is that different than colleges in the past, though, is another question.
Well, it is, and I'll tell you one thing it is different, is that young people today can't get work.
Yeah.
So they've never developed that ethic that comes with with producing something, with feeling valuable, adding value to others. They're completely cut up. Their lives are separate from the rest of society. In a way in which hasn't been true in the past, and that's tragic.
To add to that, I think that's right, and it's also, though, that, I mean, think of the changes over the last 20 years in K through 12, in the experiences of a developing child, because these students don't just, it's not like they're born and they appear on college campuses. They have like 16 years of life they go through first.
Yeah.
And what you've seen over the last 20 years is this enormous change. There's police in schools. There's zero tolerance. Anyone who expresses any creativity or individuality or makes a mistake is weeded out, is expelled, in some cases arrested over the silliest things. They get the message that they're in danger all the time by being creative, interesting, free-thinking people. They're not allowed, if they play at parks by themselves, their parents are arrested. There's no, figure it out, creative, be on your own playtime where you you have true freedom. So they get to campus, and for the first times in their lives, they actually have freedom, and it terrifies them, and they demand the emotional coddling they've gotten their entire lives. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think helicopter parenting and zero tolerance policies in schools are cultural factors that partly explain what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant insight. And the regimentation of public schools where everybody's marched around like robots, there's no danger for anybody. All curriculum is set. As you say, there's no creativity left. And so yeah, there's an emotional truncation that takes place in people's minds. You know, they've never done anything dangerous. They've never heard anything dangerous. You know.
That's one reason the public school thing, Jeff, is I feel like that hasn't been brought up even among even as much with someone like Robby, who again has covered this stuff so often, is that maybe we're asking too much of people, most of whom who were sent to public school and got all that sort of authoritarianism, and then they go to college and they maybe get more left sympathies a lot of the time. They discover them, or they were building the whole time, and they're suddenly supposed to be excited about free speech and, as you say, a certain amount of dangerous thinking and risk-taking, and they were never given that chance at all, not in their schooling, certainly, in public school sort of environments. So maybe it's sort of unfair to criticize them when, you know, they were made this way.
Well, and also excluded from the workplace, right? None of them you can't even get a freaking job anymore. I mean, even at 16, you have to kind of be more like 18 or something before you can even work. And by that time, nobody cares. You know, you're moving on with your life.
Well, yeah, it's like that that old baby boomer kind of approach to college, where you can, you know, major in whatever humanities subject you want, and then just roll into employment until retirement. Even for some boomers, that's becoming harder to actually accomplish in the long term. But yeah, that's really sending a lot of shocks to people who actually run these things and have to sort of figure out how to, you know, exist. And then you get things like the crisis of the humanities, and you have, you know, Marco Rubio talking about philosophers versus welders and stuff like that. So you have like this whole thing that's sort of just rolling into, all right, well, how do we educate people after high school?
Right.
And how do we?
And I tell you, it's a problem when these kids get out of college, because I've employed many of them and I interview many of them. I've had a lot of experience with dealing with kids just out of college. And it takes a very long time. I mean, like 2 and 3 years in the workplace before they sort of get the hang of like normal interactions in a commercial workspace.
Yeah.
Where there's a boss and there's expectations, they're expected to be creative, and you know they have to have a certain finesse and dealing with a variety of different kinds of people in surprising sort of situations. You know, where they're evaluated based on the value they provide, you know, to others, and it's a hard transition for these kids they've never experienced anything remotely like this. And like I say, I think it takes like 2 and 3 years of difficult sort of socialization process for them to enter into what the rest of the world has always called just regular life. It's tragic.
Now, I feel like I should take more of the devil's advocate angle here. I was hoping William Gillis would be able to chime in, and he's busy figuring out his connection.
Not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
All right.
But again, you know, Lucy, and Robby, I wonder if you agree with this. I tend to think that with all the popular coverage, there's a reason why all this stuff is being covered in all the papers and everybody's talking about it all the time. There's an implication that there's larger social significance to this.
Right,
you know?
right, yeah.
And that this is about where we're headed as a society. Is this where we want to go? Is this, you know, human rights, the free spaces and free speech and political correctness and diversity and all these things? I just think all this stuff is exaggerated. I really think this is just about the very weird world of college.
I don't know if I can agree with that, because it's hard for me not to worry at least a little bit that if you have a bunch of people who are requesting, not, you know, overthrowing the administrators, because they are the ones going into massive debt, so you could certainly argue that they should have a greater say in how things are run at college. Not sure how much of one. But they're not, you know, it always appears like they're asking for more top-down mandates. Not that they're asking for fewer, not like they supposedly did back in the day, where they wanted free speech and they didn't stop, you know, they wanted to not have curfews in their dorms anymore. It feels like they want to tinker with which leaders they have at this college, as opposed to, say, getting rid of them altogether. And that combined with sort of what appears to be a lack of valuing of, you know, the free speech in itself, it feels like to me there could be a consequence once these people go toddle off into the
Well,
real world.
I think it's true, but I don't know that it has larger significance outside.
I hear what you're saying. I think there's merit to that. You know, we focus on colleges. Everyone who's an intellectual, who's commenting about these things, who's in journalism or the media or a public notable person went to college and has like some attachment to college and like really disproportionately cares what's going on there.
It's true.
So I hear what you're saying, and I try not to get caught up in that. Like, just we're invading Syria. You know, let's talk about some consequential things and not get so worked up about college students. But college students are always wacky, and eventually they'll go away. However, so I understand what you're saying, and I don't know, maybe that's right. But I worry, especially because we push now everyone to go to college, and this is government doing. You know, there's government policy to incentivize everyone to go to college. You're no one unless you go to college. That's the ticket to acceptance. So when everyone is being crammed onto these universities, which do seem, and I had been saying for a long time, I really thought it was just a very active minority of students on each campus who, like, you know, the squeakiest wheels generating all this stuff. But I mean, I've seen there was a nice survey came out like 2 weeks ago. It was a new criterion about students' attitudes in general, and it revealed, it was troubling to me, it revealed like majorities of students thought, a cartoon that mocked people's religions or ethnicities should not be run. The university should prohibit it. If a speaker with a history of hate speech was going to speak, the university should prohibit them. 60-something% said yes, mandatory trigger warnings. Not just the trigger warnings were good, but they should be mandatory. Mm-hmm. Does this have broader consequences for society? Maybe it doesn't. But I have to worry that the people who will eventually be leading our society, who will be taking over important roles in journalism, in the media, who will be celebrities, who will be public intellectuals, developed all this in this stultifying kind of environment of absolute hysteria over safety. Like, these are paranoid people who think, who are talking about how they thought the KKK was invading Mizzou. There were tons of people on campus tweeting that, which was of course ridiculous. Yeah, it was totally a fabricated rumor, but they thought it was serious. It was kind of like a satanic child abuse thing, like totally phantom imagining KKK figures running around campus. So these very scared people who've been scared their whole lives because they've been told everything they do is dangerous, and free speech itself is dangerous. Expression is dangerous. Ideas are like a threat to your physical safety. I have to wonder what kind of effect that will have down the road. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's much ado about nothing. But
maybe they'll grow out of it. Yeah,
you write 3 years in the real world, and it's all behind you. It's possible.
You can't have these attitudes in a commercial workspace. And the thing about once you actually get a job, you have to actually worry about keeping that job, and adapting to a new environment. And it's a difficult transition, I think, for people coming out of university today, because they're just so ill prepared. But the difference is dramatic. You can't have these kind of attitudes and succeed in the workplace. I mean, I'm not aware of any job you can hold anywhere. Maybe a government bureaucracy or something like that.
But maybe they'll just elect Bernie Sanders and extort the productive class. They'll never aspire to work, and they'll stay on campus forever, and that's how they solve that problem.
No, I guess to respond to the Jeffrey's thing, I guess academia is probably the other place where you could have those views, right? Because that's where all of this is happening.
But that's so disturbing, because don't you want academia to be about learning? I mean,
of course I do, but
learning stuff and thinking about stuff and potentially, if not changing your mind, considering alternate viewpoints. I mean, there's no ideological diversity at college.
So here's a totally random question that occurred to me. It's kind of a thought experiment. How do you think it would go over if a school were teaching a class on Nazi literature? Like that would be something that'd be fascinating to study.
Oh, I think it should teach a class on Nazi literature. I think people ought to read that stuff, actually.
But I mean, to know why this is wrong. I mean, that's the whole point, right?
What's the danger that we would better understand Nazism? Yeah. Oh no, not that.
Turns out things weren't so bad.
I could see people going crazy. Like, I mean, that's the rule. What's it, Godwin's law, right? That everything goes to Nazis.
Well, I want to violate another rule, which I guess is Orwell's law. But I have to say that a lot of the sort of the collegiate lingo and the taking offense, it always goes back to taking offense at figurative language. I mean,
that's right. You were talking about this before.
Robby was saying the thing with, not saying "stand with me" because that's ableist.
That was a real tweet from a real student activist today that I read.
Are you sure that was real? And you always have, it's important to check. But like that, I mean, there are a million other examples like that. There was the Smith College thing that just, usually I ignore the college kids, but that drove me insane because they had a free speech panel. They had a woman defending free speech, and she said the word nigger in context, talking about Huckleberry Finn and not censoring and things like that.
But it was worse though.
But
it got worse where they censored. I thought you. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so excited.
I know you. I can be meaner to you because I know you better. They sent the people publishing this transcript censored that word. They censored the word crazy because it's ableist.
Oh yeah.
And like I can never decide. And also a young woman who worked on, I believe, the Smith College newspaper wrote something in the Huffington Post about this, and it was like how you can be an ally. But she referred to the act of saying that slur, again, even in the context, as an explicit act of racial violence. So you have them being simultaneously offended by a figurative use of crazy, commonly accepted thing, while also saying that another word is actually violence. And I find like the lingo stuff, there's a lot of potentially bizarre implications, but you always have people offended by figurative language. And the Orwell thing is that the whole point of Newspeak was to eliminate all ambiguity and poetic language.
I agree with a lot of the language changes that's happened over the last, say, 20 or 30 years. I like gender-neutral pronouns, and I like, and also I like manners and people being nice to each other, and if people are shitty to each other, I think they deserve a kind of censor, and
right.
But yeah, I mean. But so it puts me in an uncomfortable position because I mean, even generally, I think a lot of political correctness, so-called, is actually a good thing. I mean, it's just sort of the basic decorum and respect for others. I mean, that's all fine, but yeah, this attempt to sort of like completely reconstruct our language and thereby our political ideologies. Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to use a cliche, but it's just gone too far.
And there is, I mean, I think these people also forget the contrarian nature of the human. I saw a piece on the website Mashable a couple months ago, and it was all about, words that you shouldn't use if you want to be an ally of various marginalized groups. And about 2/3 of them I would never use, I mean, unless I was talking about them in context. I would never use them, to insult someone. And 1/3 of them I think were more silly. But the tone of it was so infuriating and provoked all these impulses that may not be rational, but they made me want to be more of an asshole. And I'm pretty nice. And I agree with you, Jeffrey, that a lot of words it is okay to not. And everyone has their line. I mean, people who think they're above all this still don't go around yelling various words at black people or any other minority. They don't do that. So they too agree that there is a line that you don't cross.
Right.
The question is where it is. But if you're being lectured about it, that doesn't usually help, because it turns off people like us. None of us are bad people.
Yeah, you can actually cause a blowback.
That's what's happening, I think, honestly.
Yeah, I tend to think that's right. I mean, yeah, from my read of God, when I think about the number of people I have to ban from my Twitter accounts just for just outrageous, speech, outrageous, things that they believe. I mean, basically neo-Nazis. I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, I don't know if it's just because we have social media now, or I was just naive in the past, but the radical right in this country it strikes me as being like really on the rise in a sort of blowbacky way against a lot of this stuff, and it actually concerns me.
Yeah, I hope that's not true, but it's possible. engage.
Have you ever been trolled by neo-Nazis?
I actually have tried to argue with some of the nationalist Confederate type people, and I've had some interesting talks with them. The interesting thing about them is that if you as soon as you use the word racism, they start to make fun of you because they have responded to, the liberal use of the word racism to describe everything, and they've taken that in their reactionary way to mean that racism is extinct, like it's a myth now. So as soon as you use it, you're one of them. And talking to them was totally fruitless, but sort of interesting.
Yeah, every time I encounter somebody who says that racism is extinguished and it's a lie and a myth, they themselves embody the fact that everything they're saying is wrong. I mean, that's been my
well,
whole.
Well, the question of to what extent racism, because these at Mizzou and other campuses, they're saying the campuses are systemically racist.
Right.
And that's what they're so incensed by, and to the extent to which that's true, of course we have great racial injustice still in America, although we've made significant positive strides. We still have a very racist criminal justice system, drug war, things of that nature. But and while there's still racism, I accept what they're telling me on campuses. It just can't be the case that campuses are more systemically racist than the society at large. It's just not true. No one, but they're bastions of privilege. I mean, these are people who are more fortunate than the less well-educated, who tend to be more subject to racial insensitivity, to hold more racially insensitive views, to be victims of police. Racially problematic institutions. So while that's not to minimize what students are going through, and they're saying, we're in pain, we're hearing slurs, and it's terrible, and I don't want to minimize what they're saying, but it kind of have to have a sense of perspective, I think, and I think that's been lost, and you get accused of sympathizing with racists if you say you should have a sense of perspective about it.
I think all this stuff actually belittles the real evil of actual racism, which, as you say, is still out there. I mean, racism is a wicked, destructive ideology that leads to systematic oppression of people based on their race, and I see it everywhere in the world today. But as you say, it's not. I did not see it in that email.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a very delicate email, a very decent sort of. I agree with these sentiments, but maybe it's not administrative top-down manner. Even if the initial email was not a mandate to not wear offensive costumes, the principle of sort of the chilling effect of all of this shit, and maybe that shouldn't be what college is about. That is what offends the people screaming at that man and for what his wife wrote.
These things can be complicated. Go ahead, Robby.
And I have to say this because it's true, but Mizzou and these institutions, they discriminate in favor of black people for admissions, and they discriminate against Asian people. So if you're talking about what is systemic discrimination, to me, it's not admitting to people to college based on their race, which is the plight of Asian Americans in a great many colleges and universities. That's
another can of worms
people, but
it opens.
What's that? Yeah, I know that's a totally different issue, but when I hear systemic racism, that's what I think of.
No, I think Robby makes a good point, and actually, from my perspective, I'm very happy for universities to discriminate however they want to discriminate. I think there's something to say for diversity on campus, and if you have to manipulate admissions requirements to achieve that, I think that's. I mean, if I were a college administrator, I would certainly do that. So I don't have a problem with discrimination as such. But you're certainly right. I mean, if you're going to complain that all discrimination is evil, Asians have a very difficult time of it in American universities today. And by the way, not just in technical programs, but in things like music schools. Where Asians are wildly overrepresented and systematically, you have to be if you're Asian, you have to be tremendously more awesome than the average, white American to get in because they basically don't want you.
And basically, males also their numbers are decreasing. I think in general in colleges. So maybe someday we'll have to sort of make sure that more men come back to college. I mean, I don't know. Like we could defend sort of all of this on the grounds of like, it's not society as a whole. So you can, exclude and have safe spaces, but then you have the public dollars problem. And like, there's a lot of
Well, there's also the diversity between campuses, and can I just bring up the fact that I was just again at Hampton, Sydney, and Virginia. Does anybody know about Hampton, Sydney? Has anybody ever heard about that university before?
No.
Never? Okay, so it's one of 3 all-male colleges in the United States, and it was established in 1775. It's kind of what do they call a little ivy? It's got 1,000 students. It's very difficult to get in and very difficult to stay in once you're there. And I was just blown away by the campus environment. But, we don't encounter this anymore, this sort of all-male institutions. In fact, I think we're a little bit afraid of them. We're like, oh, what does this mean, this men's rights thing? Have we got men going the other way here or what? So I was very, you know what I mean? There's a sense of like, ooh, is this rampant anti-feminism, just out of control or what? Testosterone or what? And I got to tell you, I was sensitive to the students because I didn't want to, pester them. But it turns out I did ask these kind of questions. They had all been asked. All the students have been asked these questions many times. I was blown away at just the incredible sort of normalcy of the place, and just the decorum and the politeness and the sheer decency of the students and their capacity for just adult behavior, just being decent. And I don't think it's because it's all male.
Right.
I'm saying that I think the initial impressions that you might have, as an outsider, and go, oh, an all-male university, they must be, just manism must be rampant there, and it's just not.
Well, so this is why we need it's a shame William Gillis's technical connection failings happened, because he's sort of a more left anarchist, and he would have been disagreeing nonstop, I think, with all of us for the past half hour.
Oh, let me just say also, I guess my point in that is that there's nothing wrong with institutions that cultivate a particular kind of demographic for whatever kind of historical institutional reason, and you can have diversity between campuses, not just within them. Sorry, I didn't need to divert you from that.
I went to my undergrad. They just started accepting boys this fall, I think, actually. They had male grad students when I was there, but no male undergrads. And so, like, they had. It's fine to do that sort of thing.
It is. There was a funny thing happened. They have some exceptions for women, like the daughters of faculty can attend.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
You can make so many solid, like, coming-of-age novels, like, in that sort of setting. That would be classic.
There was a woman who attended a couple of years ago, and she became valedictorian.
That's funny.
And so she gave the valedictory address at commencement, and the local newspapers, which for the most part ignore Hampton, Sydney, but somebody had speculated that all the men there would turn their backs on her, in protest. And there's no speculation is more preposterous than that. I mean, far from it. I mean, these are the most chivalrous, mannerly. They were celebrating. They were thrilled and proud and cheered her to the heavens because they have a special. As men, they have an obligation to be especially adoring of women.
Jeffrey, I like how you're mandating the segue into the next topic. Even as I was going to say that Gillis and his types might argue that sort of, and I would be tempted to agree if I thought a lot of these students, and I'm going to generalize, had an actually more radical end game, and if they actually really wanted to go smash the state, but like most left anarchists and liberals, like there's always this obsession with the minutia of the power dynamics, but they never quite see the whole picture, which is that top-down mandates are bad, and that's not how you I don't know. I don't see them as radical. I see them as whining liberals, not even a left breed of anarchist that has a more interesting goal in mind. They really come off as
Well,
Tumblr people.
That's one of the arguments I've heard sort of against that, is that the safe space argument, saying that people aren't providing that for them, is kind of a loophole into the argument that the administrator, was making, which is based on that old school liberal good faith solves everything civility, saying you're not doing what you're saying, you're just making conciliations. Fuck you. We're gonna just go wherever from here. And that's just one interpretation that I've heard that may or may not have legs, which is basically saying that it's not so much they're being coddled, it's that they're kind of exploiting a certain chink in the armor that liberals have always had, which is, everyone get along, free speech, open society.
Yeah, and that goes to, and I often get this criticism when I'm saying, oh, they're anti-free speech, they're attacking free speech, and then some people will say to me, well, they're making speech. What they're engaged in is speech. You just don't like certain kinds of speech. So we do have to be careful. Like, so I don't want to condemn them for being radical and upset and
they're
taking
not
to
radical,
the streets
though.
and saying, well, right, but saying their president should resign. Maybe he should have resigned for the skyrocketing tuition prices of the institution that the taxpayers of Missouri are forced to pay for these students to go to get degrees that don't mean anything. Like, maybe there are good reasons to be upset. I just don't know if some random guy in a truck yelled something and no one could have done anything about that because it's perfectly legal. Is that a good reason to get rid of the? And I'm saying I don't think so. So like that's I'm giving them feedback, but I want them to be active and engaged, and I don't want to be saying kids these days they're just terrible and they sound like a conservative myself, because I'm not. I'm a radical person. But yeah, I mean, the outcome of this stuff at Mizzou is that the police sent an email to students saying, if you hear something hurtful, call us. Call the police. The cops will come.
Boy,
that is the outcome of their radicalism, right? So I think it's very worthwhile to criticize it if you're criticizing it in that sense and not just saying, oh, students should shut up and listen and do whatever they're told.
Right. What did you think about? Because I was in the middle of writing a column about this. That was tending towards the conservatism you're just talking about, and I'm uncomfortable with that. And then I read the comments by Ben Carson and Trump, and why they were asked about this. I don't know. As if as president they're going to be adjudicating matters that but I guess as philosopher kings they have to know all things. I don't know what, but anyway, yeah, and they said something that sounds a lot like what I said at the beginning of this show, and it gave me the creeps, actually.
Right? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they're terrible spokespersons for political correctness has gone too far, because they're so disingenuous when they say it, because they're thin-skinned about attacks on their religions or other things.
Oh,
and
geez, no kidding. Yeah, especially Carson. Jeez.
Yeah, and I think the things that Trump says about immigrants are absolutely terrible, and we're supposed to accept that that's. And then he's like, "Oh, political correctness run amok." No, no, friend, no.
We just don't want to round up 10 million people and build an enormous border. Maybe it's not really about. Well, that's one reason why liberal stuff is often frustrating, is because they so often seem to be talking about how someone said something as opposed to what they're actually suggesting.
Yeah, they come across as more concerned that we use the right, that we don't say everyone stand up and cheer for something because that's ableist. They seem more concerned about that than our immigration policy or our war policy. It does seem that way, and I've been covering these things for a long time. I've been writing about them. I've been listening to students. I spend a lot of time in this environment, and I don't think that's an unfair interpretation based on where their anger.
And liberals in general, I would make that same critique.
But the whole thing is it's well intentioned though, right? Like it actually does go back to what Jeffrey Tucker's thing about manners, though, right? They're trying to be more decent and more and basically be doing kind of like what you wrote about chivalry toward people who have traditionally been disadvantaged and who haven't had that kind of advantage.
Oh, and we need that. We need
All
that.
right. Let's talk about chivalry.
I'm sorry. I tried to work that with you. I felt left out.
No, but you're right. I mean, I agree. I think political correctness is an attempt to recreate what I think of as sort of a very beautiful codes. Of informal codes, the court of taste and manners, as Albert J. Nock, put it, just mores that we all had for engaging each other, that we learned through commercial spaces, by the way, a lot of them, and just learned how to get along with each other, to adjust the perceived power differentials between men and women, or ethnicities or whatever, in a way that makes life more wonderful and beautiful and productive for everybody. Ways to find value in each other. And a lot of those old codes have sort of been obliterated through the rise of Leviathan, horrible wars, World War I, World War II. I mean, the nihilism that was imposed through the nuclear age, and just the ghastliness of modern life in many ways, all the responsibility of the state. And I think it's shredded these old codes, and so I see a lot of political correctness as an attempt to kind of like recreate this on a sort of a different basis. Just to find better, easier ways for us to get along with each other. It's just that it's all kind of distorted and confused, and also oftentimes coercive, which it shouldn't be.
Well, do you want to tell the good people a little bit about what you actually wrote in your chivalry piece, and defend yourself against my imminent disagreement?
Well, sure. I mean, I think that a lot of the conflicts that exist between the sexes today trace to women's perception that men are abusing their superior physical power, and along with that, a certain aggressiveness that comes with biology and everything. But not correcting for that through old codes of decorum and manners and decency. And I think men have special obligations. I am not of the view that equality is the right word to describe relationships between the sexes. I think men have special obligations, and we need to start exercising those. And yes, I'm in favor of double standards too. I believe in that men should not sit at table before women have been sat, and when they're sat down the table. Women should have doors open for them. Oh, Robbie's over there going, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
Jeffrey, I don't know if you should be swearing in front of a woman right now. I mean, I don't know that my ears can take that.
At least I will not be getting the feminist hate when this
right, exactly. You're safe.
So.
All right, no, but Jeff, though, I joke, but I don't joke. Though, is how do we know where? I mean, what is the proper line with that? Because you weren't supposed to use such salty language in front of a lady.
That's
so
true.
How do you know that that's okay?
I don't know how you know, but I did enumerate 5 basic rules that I thought would make life a lot better for everyone.
All right, tell the people then.
Well, that you don't sit down at the table before the woman sits down. When she does sit down, you pull out her chair and sort of tuck her in a little bit. I mean, it's a small move. When you are seated and a woman arrives at your table, you stand and acknowledge her presence as a way of acknowledging. Because look, Lucy, how many times have you gone to a table with a bunch of guys sitting around talking? You shut up and plop down, and you feel ignored, or like, oh, sorry for crashing your party, guys. This is a way for guys to just stand up, acknowledge your value as a human being, include you into the world, and recognize with some degree of deference your special status. And I think this is important. I think that women have to have the car door open for them. It doesn't mean you have to go around to let them out. That's fussy and absurd. But you should open the door for a woman. And yes, normal doors. You should light a woman's cigarettes, or I guess what's the equivalent now? I guess that's not really the thing anymore, but
if she has a cigarette, if she takes one out, I mean.
And look, I was just on an airplane today. Okay, women lack upper body strength. Sorry, it's just true. And
I'm okay with you. It's okay.
And suitcases. you know, you see these small women with no body strength, you know, sort of pushing suitcases into these these overhead racks, and they're like, oh, and like practically dying, and guys standing around going, oh fuck, what am I supposed to do? It's like, what? You know, guys, get with the program here, you know? I mean, you've been blessed by God or nature or whatever with certain physical advantages. You have to use those in ways that you know, that make the world work better. And I think basic codes of chivalry and manners are you know, a part of that. And in terms of paying for dinners, okay, there's a widespread perception that the man pays and he expects, you know, sex later or whatever. All this, I think all this is bullshit. I mean, I think the default should be the man should pay. But if the woman says, "Look, I'd like to split the check," then shut up and split the check. But you should at least offer. These are small, very small things, but I think they help sort of heal the perceived power differentials between men and women. I think that's what chivalry's always been about, and I think it's good to bring it back.
What about the time when women, like, very unequivocally didn't have, you know, equal political rights and rights to hold property, and they had chivalry then? I mean, our status has changed for the better. But yeah, you had chivalry back when our status was worse. So
that's true, but chivalry
to me smacks of something that's not, I would not like to bring back.
Well, okay, but chivalry also emerged out of a situation of rampant misogyny, which and slavery basically for women, which was the defining mark of women, half the human race, for the overwhelming period of all of human history, right? Until basically the age of capitalism and contract began to replace conquest as the way that people engaged each other. And the height of chivalry and those codes and those manners and that sort of sense of decorum and engagement between the sexes was when, at the end of the age of laissez-faire, you know, the 1880s and 1890s, and then World War II just kind of blew it all apart and never really came back. So, and it's just gotten worse over the course of the 20th century. So I would argue that chivalry represented sort of the culmination of the advance of feminism over a couple of hundred years.
You guys can chime in.
I can't believe how calm you are in the face of this. You are not doing You're sitting there going, that wouldn't be so bad, actually.
No, okay, all right. You want to rile me up? It's working. So, I mean, even among your examples, you have different logic at work, because yes, the tendency to have lacking in upper body strength, you see someone struggling, so you help them because they're struggling, and it's probably pretty easy for you. That's fine. Chairs tend to be very light. Car doors also tend to be light. We can master our own cigarettes, and we tend to also get, you know, a wage from a job usually, unless we're a stay-at-home mom or fabulously wealthy. So the only one that has a purely logical basis is that, you know, actually helping with the lifting of something.
Well, it's a matter of tradition and decorum and.
But you're an anarchist, Jeffrey.
Which means I don't want the state doing any of this stuff. But I think
we know.
An extra obligation on us as people to civilize the world, and my perception of feminism is that it's that a lot of it, and a lot of women's complaints about men today, really come down to this perception that men are abusing their power in small and subtle ways, you know, at the workplace, you know, and just regular engagement of normal course of life. And I think there's things that men can do to help fix this problem and do acts of deference that will help just clean up and smooth out our social lives better.
Well,
I think as anarchists, obligation to do this.
As long as we're talking about feminism broadly.
That's a terrible pun.
I saw so something I saw today that I wrote about. A 9-year-old boy, 4th grader, Florida, wrote a love note to a classmate of his, a girl, and which said, "There's a sparkle in your eyes," or something to that effect. The principal said, "If you do that again, you will be charged with sexual harassment."
Oh, good lord.
This is not the first time I've seen this. There was a
No,
kid who kissed a girl on the playground on a dare. The cops were called in that case. So there's a lot of, and I don't want to buy into war on men sort of mentality or something, but there are situations where there's institutional, government-mandated, authority-mandated factors that are undermining healthy, natural, playful relationships between young men and women that are, this is how you develop, how you learn what boundaries are. And I'm not, fine, his teacher wants to say notes are distracting in class, don't do that, it's not wanted, we can teach those things. That's actually the purpose of schools, when we're talking about K through 12 schools, is to teach manners in some
Or
respect.
you can teach them, like, you shouldn't kiss people who don't want to be kissed without calling the goddamn cops about it.
Right, we involve the cops in everything, and they think if you don't, there's going to be rampant rape and violence and pillaging everywhere. That again, it goes back to the safety paranoia that
right.
All young girls are in constant danger of serial predators, and you let one little love note go unpunished, we're going to be Somalia tomorrow. So
and what a wild overreaction to what is actually a problem. I mean, this really troubles me because rape is a reality out there. I mean, and it's also, by the way, a reality on campus in a big way too. I'm not sure how much, Robby, you've written about this subject.
A lot.
Yeah, you've right. I've read a bunch of your writing about that.
But I mean, rape is actually it's weird for women when they go to college, because they learn from all their colleagues and from older people. They have to learn how to navigate the campus environment. How to follow the bottle from the shelf to the glass to make sure it's not drugged in between. How to hold their keys walking through the parking lots. Methods for having people around them and not getting trapped in their dorm rooms by men by themselves and so on. And this is a big reality, and men don't face this reality.
But that's not just college, though, of course. I mean, we always tend to act like it is just college.
Well, I think it's worse in college, and the reason has nothing to do with the evil of men. I think it's a drinking age.
I write about that all the time. That's the specific problem on college. And before you had the drinking age, you had a culture of leisurely drinking. You would drink with your professors. It was part of the environment on campus. Now they're doing all the drinking behind closed doors in secret. They're drinking the mystery trough at the frat party.
Right.
Responsibly day drinking and passing out at 9 o'clock like good adults. They're they're chugging these super powerful drinks because they're hiding from the cops or the authority figures, and they can't go to authority figures when they actually do need help.
Well, it depends upon the school, though, right? Sorry.
And then you have a lot of these confused sexual encounters that run the spectrum from just it's kind of unclear to it was actually horrible, very violent assault, and they all happen. I haven't read a single sexual assault accusation that didn't involve heavy drinking on at least one of the two participants. It's ubiquitous. It's the number one underlying factor to this problem on campus.
I'm very glad that I learned how to drink before. I started college when I was 20, actually, but I had already. It was like by the time I turned 21, alcohol wasn't a novelty. Not because I had endangered myself particularly earlier, but I had done it enough. I had vegetarian parents.
Even kids who have been, like you, Lucy, have been taught how to drink properly in the home, and they've been drinking from the age of 14 or whatever, still they enter into college with this weird culture.
Sure.
That hasn't existed. I mean, look, when I turned 18, I was allowed to drink. I was like grandfathered in. I was 2 weeks before the new rule came in. So I didn't know anything about this bizarre, pre-gaming where you chug an entire bottle of whatever and thinking you're going to stay therefore drunk the rest of the night. I mean, it's nuts. Well, blacking out, binging. I mean, even if you've learned how to drink properly, you still enter into that culture where everybody else is doing this, and it's a bizarre world. It's a prohibition culture that we've created on campus.
Well, what is it? Well, California is actually looking at lowering the drinking age to 18, right?
I saw a text about that. That was
the highway funding bill. That doesn't that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but
have to give that up.
Well, California's like, aren't they screwed on funding anyways? So.
Well, they're going to have to give up $400 million. Robbie, you should write about this subject. I want to see some coverage of this topic because.
Yeah. Yeah, we were trying to. I've been doing, and actually, Glenn Reynolds, the Instapundit, has been the highest kind of profile writer, saying maybe this is something Obama and congressional Republicans could actually agree on if we're kind of which of course is not going to happen, but in an ideal world there could be an intersection of conservative limited government values and liberal do what you want values, and they could repeal. You'd have to repeal
and there's that organization of college presidents that are desperate to.
Yeah, Amethyst Initiative. Yeah.
But they can't seem to get any support. So this California thing is just the first sign of some activity on this front, and it really desperately needs to be encouraged by every libertarian writer and anybody with an interest in this, because this is a terrible crisis that afflicts this country, and it's ruining lives every single day. I find it just like deeply tragic and horrible. And the worst thing about it is that when you turn 18, you don't push your state legislature to You're not lobbying to repeal the drinking age. You're spending all your time trying to get a fake ID and get by with help from your friends and everything. Then you turn 21 and you forget about those people left behind. You're like, oh well, screw you. Then now it's your problem. So there's no real lobbying force to lower the age. So it's going to be up to people like us to get out there and make some noise about this.
To buy underage people drinks, of course.
Yeah.
That's a very important. I like to buy people underage drinks because it's my way of giving back. Community.
I saw you tell an audience of Young Americans for Liberty students this, and it was such a lovely moment to witness that, and I was so delighted, and I wondered how many of them were just appalled by that. They tend to be on the conservative side of
I don't know, but we have these laws are absolutely insane. It's not in Europe, you can in Europe, every normal civilized country, you can buy a beer and wine at 16 and liquor at 18. But on a practical level, basically, you can order beer and wine at 14. If you look like a responsible person, you're going to get a drink. It's just this country where things. And by the way, at Hampton, Sydney, I hope that I'm not violating any whatever and saying this, but
confidentiality.
They have a pretty much like 100% campus-wide liberality on this. There's just no carding. None of the local gas stations, liquor stores, anybody cards anybody. There's a bar on campus that'll serve anybody. There's in practice no drinking limitations, and as a result, people like Robbie said, or somebody said it earlier that. You have civilized drinking. People have champagne parties and wine tastings and like normal drinking. Not.
No, civilized drinking. Like if your article had been about like how we should bring back civilized drinking, I think I would have liked it better. Because you get feminists and liberals, they're overly skittish about saying binge drinking is dangerous, and it is going to lead to more either actual rapes or horrifyingly gray, nobody knows who wanted what situations. And that's what binge drinking does. To say that is not to blame any victims of anything. It's just sort of a practical piece of advice that people should... But people always get attacked for saying that. Always. And like I hate shit where people say that like women should never walk alone in case they get raped suddenly and things like that. Like there's a lot of safety tips that are excessive, especially in this ridiculously safe country that we live in.
Well, right. It's like if you leave your doors unlocked and you get robbed. You didn't have it's not your fault you got robbed. You had a right to not be robbed, certainly, but lock your doors. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, there is the victim blaming, like real victim blaming.
There is real victim
there.
blaming, yeah.
Conservatives are usually the ones doing it.
But it also does feed into the whole stuff we were talking about earlier, though, about about kind of how people are overly afraid of things, though, right? Because you're more likely to be violently attacked or robbed by somebody you actually know.
Right. Like I should stop trusting my friends.
It's not strangers who do it. For the most part, it's not strangers who do these things.
Yeah.
Like it's
And that actually goes against the narrative the White House, all their anti-sexual assault policies on campus presume the research of this man, David Lisak, I've written about extensively for Reason.com, where you should go to read the things I read about. Presume that, it's this plague of serial predators, these just sociopaths wandering around campuses, and just that in general, there are predators everywhere. We're overrun in society with predators, and it's not. That's not the reality.
It's dorm rooms, it's frat houses, it's the secret places on campus where people go to drink, so to hide from authorities, and this whole culture, and it's the same thing with marijuana actually. I don't think there's any relationship between pot and rape, as far as I know. I mean, I've never heard that alleged, but we've created this sort of secret societies, where people have to hide out to do stuff, and that's never a good thing.
Or I mean, any use of hard drugs where you can't, if your friend starts to OD, you have to worry about getting in trouble instead of getting them assistance. Anything that does that, but of course you you were totally outnumbered by people who think that if you say lower the drinking age, every 17-year-old will be drunk, in a homeroom and things like that.
But that's already true.
I'm seeing people going the other way. They're responding to the sexual assault crisis, and they're saying, okay, we need to crack down on parties, and we need to tell students, they're not going there yet, but they're headed toward reinstituting the things that we don't like, the curfews, the chaperoning. Yeah. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the coddling and the infantilizing. When you're telling these administrators, we're so scared, we're in danger all the time, everything is bad, save us, protect us, be our parents, they're going to go, okay, well, we're going to place all these restrictions on your lives that are unlibertarian and bad and hysterical because they exaggerate these problems.
And lead to more speakeasies and sneaking around and hiding out.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, at least we should be able to bring back the good fashion if we're going to do the speakeasies thing. I'm down with that if we're doing that, and clearly Jeff has gotten a jump on that.
Speakeasies it's just hilarious how there's a kind of a funny vogue for prohibition sneaking around. Like in Atlanta, there's a bar called Speakeasy. And you have to go into a phone booth, and you have to have the code and everything. It's all very funny. But I don't know. You say that there's no way that we can get these laws changed, but every bit of thinking that went behind the repeal of prohibition applies to people 16 to 21 years old. I mean, we still have prohibition there. It's exactly the same culture that was created among adults has been preserved, or rather recreated among youth today. So I don't know. I'd like to think that there's some hope of rationality on this front. Something's got to be done. We're certainly seeing that come about with pot to some extent. Although I think that's wildly exaggerated. I mean, people act as if things are heaven now, but people are arrested every minute or so for.
Oh, libertarians have been being well, drug war's over since 2012. As soon as the vote came in Colorado, it's way premature still. It's
they're criminalizing cigarettes. They're criminalizing cigarettes increasingly. So clearly, it's not like all drugs are getting more legal. Pot is enjoying a moment of I think increasing legality, but people need to fight for what.
It's in certain geographic regions.
Yeah.
I mean, in Georgia, they don't send you to jail for pot anymore, but they will pillage you. They will ruin your life. They will put you through drug rehab, and then test you and get urine samples from you for 6 months and drag you in front of a judge and humiliate you and give you a criminal record. And potentially ruin, take away your driver's license and ruin your job. I mean, so it's still just unbelievably oppression. Just because they're not putting you behind bars doesn't mean it's not oppressive. It is oppressive.
That's a really great point. It reminds me of Mike Riggs, who's now with Families Against Mandatory Minimums. I used to work with him at whatever that magazine is called.
Reason Magazine.
No.
Reason.com.
But Riggs wrote a piece about someone who basically had one oxycodone pill that they didn't have a prescription for, And they didn't go to jail. You know, none of like the really dramatic stuff happened. But they basically had this shackle put on them in their everyday life. They had to go, you know, do drug court. They had to go through all these mandated things. And anybody who, you know, their economic stability, if it's tenuous, you know, and they have to go somewhere and miss the morning of work, and then it tends to snowball. It's really, you know, non-dramatic, non-door kicking in often type of life ruining. It's the subtle kind that.
But it's hanging around in courtrooms for day after day after day, having to take off another day on the job to drive, you know, 2 hours to the courthouse or whatever, and getting pillaged, you know, for $2,000 and having it on your record.
Right.
And it just goes on and on. It's truly is oppressive, and I just don't think we should get too confident about this. I mean,
I totally agree. Yeah.
Total oppression in this country, you know, for marijuana. I mean, yeah, things are getting a lot better, but you know, I was in front of a judge the other day who told, and there was like 150, you know, poor peaceful slobs sitting there getting pillaged by the judge, and every person, again, 2/3 of them were in there for pot possession. And every one of them, he said, "This is not Colorado." You know, that was his mantra again and again and again. This is not Colorado. In Georgia, you can do 3 years in jail for this, but I'm going to be lenient. I'm only going to charge you $2,500. You're going to have to go to drug rehab.
Only $2,500.
What a swell guy.
Yeah,
that'd be a huge amount to me, much less somebody who doesn't have like a family who can back them up and stuff. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Well, you know what's amazing to me is I saw these guys. This happened again and again. He would say, "It's $2,500. Can you pay it today?" And they'd be like, no."
Right.
And so he'd say, "Well, okay. Can you pay it by November 22nd?" And they'd be like, "Well, not really." He said, "Well, you're going to do that because that's the money you owe me." Me. He always said me. Me.
Oh God.
Oh, offensive.
Because they pay his salary, right?
Yeah, and so he sends these poor people, these desperately poor people off with now an agenda to somehow, somewhere, raise $2,500 in the next 30 days. So what are you going to do?
Sell some weed? Yeah.
Right?
Something like that.
Where else are you going to get $2,500? And it's hard to steal money these days, you know?
It always comes back to me, like, why people become irrational conspiracy theorists, because there's so many systematic bullshit things that fit together so nicely that feel like they're on purpose, like to just squash people, as opposed to just being sort of the way it's set up. Not that that excuses anyone, but I don't know. It's just there's so many things like that the government does every second, and
well, the whole court system is a gigantic conspiracy against justice. I mean, it's just so evil. I mean, I felt like Robespierre or something. Not Robespierre, who's the great advocate of, you know, freeing all the prisoners in France. Rousseau, I guess, is what I mean to say. But I just wanted to like break down the walls and just yell everybody, you know, go free, fellow citizens. You know,
that would have been nice.
Leave this
when
tyranny.
You went to jail. Yeah.
There wasn't a single criminal in that entire courtroom, and I was there with 150 people. Not one actual criminal. Nobody had hurt anybody.
If you ever do that and then go to jail, I will help to get your bail together amongst online libertarians. This I vow, Jeffrey. I will help you if you ever go that way.
I will have a hard time letting you know, because when you go to jail, they take everything. You don't have a cell phone. You're just completely. It's just, I don't know how many of you have been to jail, but it's like, you know, it's unbelievable. Going to jail.
I've never been yet. I almost did when G20 came to Pittsburgh, and there were 1,000 riot cops in the streets. And I think my cousin and my friends and I barely made it out of there without being arrested. We had to dramatically jump into a dorm that wasn't ours and hide from tear gas, and it was very dramatic.
Well, they invaded the University of Pittsburgh. I mean, that's it was like, it's not mincing. It's not like exaggerating to say they invaded a college university they invaded a university on a Friday night.
I've never felt such city loyalty in my life as when I saw 1,000 riot cops rolling in.
Oh, let me just add something real quickly about the drug story. So when I was and spent the day in jail, another guy came in with me, and they searched him very thoroughly and found a tiny flecks of pot in his pocket, and charged him with a felony charge of narcotics trafficking in a correctional facility. which I think carries 3 to 5 years in jail, something like that.
Christ.
You know, so, and this was because he had pot, a little tiny few flecks of pot in his pocket. So this is the kind of nonsense that goes on. Pot is still being used every day all over the country as an excuse to oppress people.
Well, that's like, that goes back to what you were saying about the criminal justice system being oppressive, right? Where they're not charging him with that because they're actually going to nail him with that. They're charging him with that so that they can get into plea bargain.
Yeah, that is how it tends to
work.
Oh,
I know. Well, everybody in that courtroom plead out, right? I mean, like even I did. I signed a statement of guilt for something I didn't actually do. And I said to the judge, I said, is it a problem for you that I didn't actually do this thing you're asking me to sign? He said, well, do you want a higher fee? Or do you want a higher fine? I didn't, you know, and I said, no, I want to pay this lower fine. And he said, well, then sign the paper. So I actually signed a paper, like on penalty of perjury, admitting guilt to something that I didn't actually even do, just because it was something they pulled out of the hat that was a lower fine than what the thing I did do. So, you know.
That about sums it up, doesn't it?
So this is like an application of some like Godwin's law for libertarians or something. We start out talking about free speech in college, eventually get around to blasting the drug war. Right?
Well,
we'll call this Lucy's law. How about that?
Lucy's law.
Thank you. That's very nice of you, Robbie. I'll take that honor. Yeah, it's just the way it works out. That's all. I mean, yeah. I wanted to talk about chivalry, but at the end of the day, even though I don't agree with Jeffrey and I don't really want deference. Well, see, it's annoying because I like when, like, if I'm walking home at night and like some guy crosses the street instead of walking close behind me, or like others. Like I don't like when years ago some dude asked me out in an empty parking lot. And I don't think he like intended to murder me. I really think that he was well-meaning and kind of a moron. But like there are certain things that make women feel threatened. And I think even if most people don't get raped suddenly by a stranger, just like knowing the fact that some things make women feel threatened and acting accordingly is nice. But it's the chair thing and the sort of the more what feels like more high society things and the use of the word deference that sort of is
don't be creepy. How about that?
Don't be right? Be nice and don't be creepy.
Don't be creepy.
Listen, these are good rules.
They are good rules.
So I have to head out because I've got to drive back to the airport because I left something at the airport. Incredible.
Oh.
Before midnight, so I'm taking off.
All right. Well, thanks. That'll be our sign to wrap it up. You go, and I'll wrap up things.
Okay. Thanks for everybody. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for coming, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Great talking to you.
All right, so audience that still remains, thanks for remaining all this time. That's what happens when you start talking about the drug war and it just keeps going. And like I always like this because it's like I'm hanging out with a weird collection of people I would never hang out with in the three-dimensional world. So I never really want to cut it off. But let us end with tell the fine people, where they should look at your work or plug any website. Robert, if you don't have anything like that, go. Do it. Plug. Why do you talk?
Who do you want to talk?
Well, either of you. See, there's too much deference happening right now. Robbie, where should people read your work?
Reason, it's this little-known magazine, occasionally libertarian. Reason.com, and I'm also
never heard of it. Not in my life, but it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, nobody knows. And the Daily Beast, where I write a column about free speech on college campuses, which we were discussing. And if you happen to live in or near the Charlottesville area, I'm speaking at the University of Virginia, the Students for Liberty conference there this coming weekend, where I will be talking about campus issues and sexual assault.
All right. I didn't know about the Daily Beast thing, so that's legit. Chris, what about you?
I guess the most recent thing is I have an essay coming out at the American Conservative that I'm not certain people will actually read because it's a very niche cultural subject.
That's still a legit publication. That's good.
It is. It's in print. It's not online yet, so it doesn't really exist. But, coming along.
All right. Sounds good. Robert, anything to add?
No, I don't really have anything to plug. I mean,
It's like pick a website.
Pick a website.
Yeah.
Oh, God, you didn't prepare me for this.
Sorry, I thought maybe you'd watched them before. All right.
The man will not be plugged.
No, he won't. Okay, fine. Mystery man. All right, and obviously go look at Liberty.me and look at Fee and particularly Jeff's stuff.
Oh,
and
wait.
Read his chivalry. Oh my God, shut up, Robert.
I figured out a website. Check out
Where's the deference? Where's the deference? Okay,
check out antiwar.com.
Thank you for interrupting me to pander and suck up. That was definitely done. All right, yes, go to antiwar.com. I supposedly have some Federalist stuff in the pipeline. I have to do a Vice thing tomorrow. I spoke at the SFL in Pittsburgh last weekend, so you can't travel and see that. I'm sorry. But yeah, go read Jeff's chivalry thing, and let the arguing continue, because God knows we don't have a drug war to worry about or anything a little more substantial. All right, I think we're done, guys. Chris, Robbie, and Robert, thank you very much for joining me today. Thanks to Jeff. Poor William Gillis, we needed that angry left anarchist perspective, but the tech gods would not oblige us. Yeah, this has been Politics for People Who Hate Politics. Thanks for watching, and join us. I should have plugged more Liberty.me shit. Every other week, 10 p.m. Thursdays at Liberty.me. That's where I'll be, and you should be there too. Okay, bye. No more talking. Bye.